come back to New South Wales now, and a debate that really surprised the nation, I think, with the parliamentary debate and the legislation considered in New South Wales in recent weeks on the decriminalisation of abortion. New South Wales being the last state to embark on this reform, but it has surprised many people, especially on the Conservative side of politics. The legislation has now passed the lower house. It's yet to be going through the upper house of the New South Wales Parliament, and it is creating some consternation for the New South Wales government and Conservative politics generally. I'm joined now on set by the former Deputy Prime Minister and National Party leader, John Anderson. Thanks for joining us, John.
Chris, good to be with you.
First up, as a New South Welshman, did you have any inkling, going with the state election only last year, that you're going to have a coalition government essentially facilitating this reform early in a new term?
None, and it's in the context I'd want to place it of me being increasingly concerned at the number of people in the party who were saying, what's happened to the National Party? We seem now to be a progressive party, particularly on social issues. And I've been trying to say to anyone who would listen, look, only 1/3 of Australian voters self-identify as left. 2/3 do not. This is a left-wing progressive issue. And we're really getting to the point where a lot of moderates and Conservatives say, everyone seems to speak for the progressive end. You know, you've got the Labor Party, you've got the unions, you've got Get Up, you've got a lot of the media, you've got chunks of the Liberal Party, you've got great slabs of the business community. Who speaks for traditional values, a traditional approach for social harmony? Well, traditionally, we've always thought the National Party could be relied upon. Suddenly, they seem to be at the forefront of every progressive issue. We get back into government without any warning, bang. There we have a number one progressive issue being advanced solidly by the party.
I should correct myself. The election, of course, was earlier this year, but the point being here that apparently Gladys Berejiklian as Premier and presumably John Barilaro as Deputy Premier knew that this was an issue they were going to need to address, had been talking to Alex Greenwich about it, the Independent, and yet didn't level with voters even to that extent. Whatever your view on the actual legislation, surely voters needed to be advised that this issue was going to be addressed in a new parliament.
Chris, this is the thing I've been going on about for ages now. Our polity is breaking down. Everyone's saying that. People feel excluded. They feel marginalised. You don't get good public policy out of a bad debate or a truncated debate or a silenced debate. Regardless of your views on this, this is a dreadful process. Someone's pointed out today, when they finally were dragged, kicked and screaming to an inquiry, it's 5 days on an issue of enormous importance to many people. It goes to the heart of the view of life, versus 5 months on animal cruelty. I mean, if you believe in democracy, and you're a member of the National Party, and that's a widely held view out there now that there's undue influence coming from a couple of people who no longer have any great rural affinity but live in inner metropolitan, inside the goat cheese wall, and have absorbed a lot of those views and attitudes, well, that's your democratic right. But you really want to damage the core basis of a party if you're no longer comfortable with where that party is.
Well, this is your point about the political positioning of the Nationals, especially on social issues. It's worth pointing out here that this legislation got through the lower house of the New South Wales Parliament, not really because of Liberal Party votes, even though the Liberal Party in New South Wales is seen to be very moderate or very progressive. But there are a lot of Conservative Liberals voted against this, but it actually got through with Labor, moderate Liberals and most Nationals MPs.
Absolutely, it did, and it's an open secret that there's a big, strong push from the upper house members to get this through. The Attorney-General said it's bad law, poorly drafted, and he couldn't support it. You've had opposition to things. I mean, look, on sex selection, such an abhorrent idea. I would have thought most women would find it disgusting beyond belief. And you had the rejection of an amendment.
An amendment was put forward to make it illegal to have an abortion based on sex selection, and that was defeated. Now, they might have a look at that again in the upper house, but as it stands, that amendment was defeated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like most people, I hadn't stopped to think about that, but we know it happens. And then they say, oh, the experts say there's no evidence. Well, of course there's not any evidence. I'm not going to put up my hand and say, but we know it happens internationally.
Well, I saw
it happens in subsets here. Why not simply put it beyond the law? Does anybody want to defend abortion for sex selection? And another one that really troubles me, we now know the science is advancing. One of the reasons in America that young people are starting to rethink abortion is that they're seeing those scans, you know, the images.
The ultrasound images, you can see them at 12 or 13
door.
weeks, and you can see a beating heart. You can listen to your child's beating heart, yes.
And they're looking at that and saying, there's my little brother, there's my little... It is changing attitudes. The other thing we know now is the pain threshold. From quite early on, in the womb, a baby, surprisingly early on, feels and reacts to pain, or reacts and feels to pain the same way as a newborn. Well, why not do something on that area as well if we're going to go down this road and say part of the condition is that that little human life be anaesthetised?
Look, of course, abortion itself is a divisive issue, and people have their different views. And you're obviously pro-life rather than pro-choice. But is it not an anomaly that in New South Wales abortion was still covered under the criminal code, whereas it's treated as a health issue in the rest of the country, and New South Wales needed to make that reform, even if it makes no practical difference to how abortion is administered in this state?
Well, I would say to you that, look, we had a social consensus of some sort. It was not as though this was a contentious issue. Opening it up in the way that it has made it highly contentious, and the coalition needs to realise that a lot of its most loyal supporters, and this is more so in the National Party, even I suspect than the Liberal Party, and yet it's been in the Liberal Party that there's been a big pushback. Who's speaking in the National Party for all of those people who in good conscience have problems with this? The other
John Barilaro was in that very chair actually was on this program yesterday, and he said he was very comfortable, had voted for the bill and was happy with the way Parliament had handled it.
Well, I must, with respect, disagree, because I think it does go to the heart of good government. There are 5 days for an inquiry when you've got issues like gender selection, like pain alleviation. And the reality is that, of course, the law as it stood, at common law, the basis of Western society has always been around your view of human life in all its forms. Does life have intrinsic value? Does every life have intrinsic value? Now, we had a situation where, in cases of necessity, abortion was acceptable. Now, with open slather, with, on demand, one of the great problems is I suspect many women will be subjected to more, not less pressure from people like boyfriends who just say, deal with it.
I want to go back to John Anderson now, former Deputy Prime Minister, former Federal Nationals leader. Given you're so disappointed, John, on what's happened with in New South Wales regarding the management of abortion law reform and the Nationals' role in that, what's your assessment of John Barilaro's leadership of the State Nationals Party as Deputy Premier?
I'm going to leave that for judges, for the electorate to judge. But listen, the point I want to really establish here is we've got this terrible breakdown in our ability to negotiate our way forward. The deeper our differences, the greater the need for civility and respect, and for putting aside anger and disgust and contempt. Now, one of the things that I pick up very clearly is that many National Party members now are openly contemptuous of Liberals who have voted against that. That means they're openly contemptuous of the values of a lot of the people they respect. So I actually think I would call on the New South Wales National Party, which, by the way, puts out regular newsletters talking about how they've got money for this or something else, whatever. They're not covering this, and it's a matter of great importance to many. And she wouldn't mind me saying it, to my wife as a mother, and feels very strongly about this. And she would want me to say it's a very delicate issue, and we need to be very sympathetic to the stresses that many women face. But there are many of us who feel that these go to the very heart of how we're going to view one another. Are we just commodities, or are human beings something special and unique and to be valued? And where does life begin? All of those classic questions, they matter to a lot of very fine Australians who traditionally have looked to the National Party to speak up. Now, the way this has been pushed through, my point is this, with something as contentious as this, if you want people to own the outcome, if the National Party leadership wants the voters out there in more conservative areas of the country to be comfortable with the decision, they need to be walked through it properly. They need to feel that they've had their questions answered, they've had their say. Whenever we truncate that process, we weaken democracy further. I'm a great believer in democracy. We need to strengthen it, not weaken it.
Are you dismayed at where the National Party is now?
I can tell you, I'm just reflecting a widespread view out there. People say it all the time. Why has the National Party gone over to the progressive side? I mean, how else can you put it? This is a progressive issue.
Could you vote for the National Party as it currently stands?
Well, let me put it this way. I'd like to see some good, sound reasons on social policy that give me heart to believe the party still believes in the things that it's always stood for in the past. Now, you know, look, and I would...
You're saying, at least on the state level, the National Party has gone away from its traditional beliefs.
Now, I'm a life member of the New South Wales branch of the party.
So are you less concerned federally?
I'm less concerned federally.
So we're talking about the State Nationals Party. How would you describe it now, and how people like you could identify it and remain members of it, vote for it?
Well, I say to those people who no longer believe in the National Party's ethos but have moved to a more progressive position, I would say, you know, is this really the place for you? Would it not be more on? I mean, Churchill sort of often said, he changed parties quite a bit. He said, well, they've moved to a place I can't be at anymore. Well, if you move yourself, as I say, it's widespread view out there. You've got a couple of people who have no real connection with rural Australia, who have enormous influence on say on these. So at the very least, what are you going to do to give heart back to moderates and conservatives, the people who man the booths? I saw a man I respect enormously the other day at home walk away from manning a booth, and he was going off to a booth where he wasn't so well known to support other candidates. Never make the mistake that a certain senior Liberal supporter did when Malcolm Turnbull was elected, of saying, oh, don't worry about the Conservatives, they've got nowhere else to go. Well, we know how that ended.
Thanks for joining us, John. Appreciate it.